Imagine a vast, storm-lashed ocean under a sky heavy with clouds, where the horizon blurs into a gray infinity. Waves crash against the hull of a wooden ship, each strike reverberating through the timbers like a warning from the unknown. Sailors clutch the rigging, their faces pale under lantern light, eyes scanning the endless expanse for signs of land that may or may not exist. Somewhere in this tumultuous void, a small fleet sails into the whispers of history, destined to leave almost no trace, yet leaving echoes in legends, maps, and artifacts scattered across the globe. This is where our story begins, with a voyage so daring, so enigmatic, that it seems almost mythical, yet there are fragments suggesting it might have truly happened. History, as we know it, is a tidy narrative. Names, dates, and events neatly organized in books, textbooks, and museum displays. But sometimes, beneath the surface of recorded events, lie anomalies, glimpses of journeys and discoveries that mainstream history cannot fully explain. Consider a map that shows coastlines that were supposedly unknown for centuries, or a legend of sailors who reached distant lands long before the explorers celebrated in school textbooks. These are the breadcrumbs of forgotten voyages, faint signals that someone, somewhere, ventured further than we are usually told. The story of this lost voyage begins not with fanfare, but with curiosity. Ancient mariners, navigating by the stars, the sun, and subtle ocean currents, set sail from ports that thrived on trade, ambition, and exploration. Records from civilizations like the Phoenicians, the Polynesians, and the Chinese suggest that seafaring was not a matter of chance, but of precision, skill, and knowledge. Yet, even as they ventured across vast oceans, reaching lands that would later vanish in a legend, their stories were often reduced to myth, their maps dismissed as fanciful sketches. What happened to these travelers? Did they survive? Were their discoveries deliberately erased from official records? These questions form the pulse of the mystery we are about to unravel. The intrigue deepens when one considers the tools and techniques these ancient voyagers employed. Without modern navigation, they relied on stars, celestial markers, and keen observation of wind and waves. They understood the rhythms of the tides, the habits of migratory birds, and the subtle shifts of ocean currents. Ships that seem primitive to us were in reality sophisticated vessels capable of long-distance travel, constructed with knowledge passed down through generations of seafarers. Their journeys required courage bordering on recklessness, an acceptance of danger that few today could imagine. And yet, for all this expertise, the historical record is almost eerily silent. Part of the allure of this lost voyage comes from what we don't know. We have fragments, a reference in a faded manuscript, a coastline accurately drawn centuries before it was officially discovered, or a tale passed down through oral tradition that hints at a fleet that vanished without a trace. Each fragment alone might be dismissed as coincidence, myth, or exaggeration. But together, they form a puzzle, a tapestry woven across time and geography, hinting at human achievement far beyond what conventional history admits. It is in these fragments that our story finds its tension, the tension between what is known and what has been concealed, between accepted history and tantalizing possibility. Even today, the remnants of these voyages whisper to us. On remote islands, the remnants of settlements hint at visitors from distant lands. Buried beneath sand and jungle, artifacts speak of connections long forgotten. And in the archives of old libraries, maps with impossible precision quietly challenge the narrative taught in classrooms. Some scholars dismiss them, others quietly investigate, but the mystery persists. Who ventured across the oceans first, and why does history seem intent on forgetting them? This is the journey we are about to embark on. A journey across centuries, oceans, and forgotten cultures, following the faint traces of a voyage that may have reshaped human understanding long before official records acknowledged it. It is a voyage not just of ships and sailors, but of secrets, lost knowledge, and the relentless human desire to explore. As we peel back layers of myth and suppressed history, we will encounter strange artifacts, enigmatic maps, and stories that challenge the conventional timeline of exploration. And so the stage is set. Picture the fleets slipping quietly away from known ports, the horizon stretching endlessly, the unknown awaiting. Imagine the mixture of excitement, fear, and determination in the hearts of those ancient explorers. They sailed into darkness and mystery, leaving behind only whispers that have traveled through centuries. Whispers that we are about to follow, piecing together a story of daring, ambition, and discovery, a story of lands reached long before recorded history acknowledged them. In the coming sections, we will trace these whispers, uncovering the evidence that has survived storms, time, and intentional erasure. Each discovery will lead us deeper into the enigma, revealing a tapestry of human endeavor that challenges the very boundaries of history as we know it. Long before the age of Columbus or Magellan, there were those who dared to navigate oceans that seemed infinite, guided not by GPS or charts printed in ink, but by intuition, observation, and knowledge passed down through generations. These were the ancient mariners, civilizations whose understanding of the seas rivaled or even surpassed what modern historians sometimes credit them with. From the Phoenicians skimming the edges of the Mediterranean, to Polynesians crossing thousands of miles of open ocean, to Chinese treasure fleets exploring beyond their coasts, these sailors left traces of journeys that challenged the official narrative of human exploration. Take the Phoenicians, for instance. Hailing from city-states along the eastern Mediterranean, they were master shipbuilders and traders. Their ships, designed for endurance and speed, traversed waters that were unpredictable and often treacherous. According to some ancient sources, Phoenician explorers may have circumnavigated Africa centuries before Europeans would attempt it. Herodotus tells us of journeys that reached unknown coasts, and legends whisper of Phoenician sailors venturing even further, across vast oceans that modern historians claim they could not have navigated. These tales are often dismissed as exaggeration, but when pieced together with evidence from maps, coastal ruins, and maritime archaeology, a different story emerges, one of daring human ingenuity that defies conventional timelines. Meanwhile, in the vast Pacific, the Polynesians mastered the art of long-distance navigation in ways that modern science has only recently begun to appreciate. Using the stars, wave patterns, cloud formations, and even the flight paths of birds, they sailed over thousands of miles of open water, colonizing islands spread across the Pacific Ocean. What is astonishing is not just their skill, but the speed and precision with which they did it. They could navigate from one tiny atoll to another without instruments, relying entirely on a sophisticated, orally transmitted body of knowledge. These were not aimless wanderers. They were deliberate, highly skilled explorers who understood the ocean in a way that challenges modern assumptions about pre-modern maritime technology. On the other side of the world, Chinese maritime expeditions under the Ming Dynasty demonstrated a scale of ambition that remained staggering. Between the early 1400s and the mid-15th century, Admiral Zheng, he led massive fleets of ships, some reportedly over 400 feet long, on voyages that reached Southeast Asia, India, the Persian Gulf, and the east coast of Africa. These fleets carried not only sailors and goods, but also diplomats, scholars, and emissaries, a mobile projection of Chinese influence across oceans. Some scholars have even speculated, based on fragmentary accounts and cryptic maps, that Chinese sailors may have reached the Americas decades before Columbus. Though controversial, these theories cannot be entirely dismissed, particularly when viewed alongside the navigational prowess of other ancient seafarers. What unites these civilizations is not just skill at sea, but the accumulation and preservation of knowledge. For thousands of years, the art of navigation was an esoteric science, closely guarded and passed down selectively. Star charts, wind patterns, and oceanic signs were not mere observations. They were treated almost as sacred knowledge, intertwined with religion, ritual, and philosophy. In many cultures, only certain priests, guild members, or elders could access this wisdom. The result was a body of knowledge so precise that entire fleets could cross oceans with minimal error, yet so secretive that much of it has been lost or misinterpreted over time. Yet, despite this mastery, the historical record remains frustratingly sparse. Written accounts are fragmented, and the physical evidence, shipwrecks, artifacts, and ports, often fails to tell the full story. Why did these great civilizations, capable of reaching distant shores, leave so little trace in the chronicles of mainstream history? Part of the answer may lie in the way history itself has been recorded and preserved. Conquerors and colonial powers often rewrote narratives to emphasize their achievements, while the accomplishments of previous explorers faded into myth. Legends of extraordinary voyages were either ignored, dismissed as fantasy, or actively suppressed, leaving behind tantalizing clues rather than full accounts. Consider the scattered coastal ruins and artifacts found far from any known ancient trade network. In some places, stone structures, pottery, and inscriptions suggest contact with distant civilizations long before official records indicate such interactions. Each of these anomalies sparks speculation and invites further investigation. Were these traces evidence of accidental drift voyages or deliberate expeditions undertaken by civilizations with knowledge sophisticated enough to reach these lands intentionally? The implications are profound. If ancient mariners reached distant continents centuries before recorded history admits, then our understanding of human migration, cultural exchange, and technological advancement must be reconsidered. Even more compelling is the consistency across vastly separated cultures. Polynesians navigating the Pacific, Phoenicians sailing the Atlantic edges, Chinese fleets venturing into the Indian Ocean, all demonstrate remarkably similar strategies for long-distance sea travel. It suggests that there may have been shared knowledge, perhaps even early exchanges of navigational techniques, which history has yet to fully uncover. In some ways, these ancient mariners were part of a hidden global network, a web of knowledge and exploration that transcended borders, politics, and language. As we begin to trace the lost voyage that may have reached lands before recorded history, it is crucial to understand this context. These explorers were not merely adventurous. They were skilled, deliberate, and operating within a framework of knowledge and tradition. Their voyages were calculated, their routes chosen with precision, and their successes, or failures, left subtle but undeniable marks on the world. By appreciating the mastery and daring of these ancient mariners, we gained a foundation to explore the evidence, legends, and artifacts that hint at a journey that history forgot, a voyage into the unknown that challenges everything we thought we knew. The ocean, vast and indifferent, holds its secrets well. But as we follow the traces left behind by these ancient navigators, we begin to see a pattern emerging, a story of courage, intellect, and discovery that predates recorded history. This is the beginning of our journey into the whispers of forgotten voyages, a story that demands not only imagination, but also a willingness to question the narratives we have been taught. Maps are meant to guide, to make the unknown knowable, to translate the vast chaos of the world into lines, symbols, and measurements. Yet some maps seem to do the opposite. They hint at places that should not exist, coastlines that are far more detailed than the era supposedly allowed, and lands that vanish from later records. These anomalous maps are tantalizing pieces of evidence, whispers from the past, suggesting that human beings may have sailed to distant shores long before recorded history gives them credit. Among the most famous is the Piri Reis map, a fragmentary chart drawn in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer. What makes it extraordinary is its depiction of parts of South America with remarkable accuracy, yet based on sources that should have been centuries outdated. Even more puzzling are indications on the map of ice-free Antarctic coastlines, regions that would not be mapped correctly until modern exploration. How could a mapmaker in the early 16th century, with limited tools, know such details? The Piri Reis map is not alone. Across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, There are references to maps that contain knowledge seemingly lost and rediscovered centuries later. Chinese nautical charts from the Ming Dynasty depict coastlines, archipelagos, and navigational hazards with precision that implies long voyages beyond the official record. In the Mediterranean, fragments of medieval charts hint at land masses and islands far beyond what would have been known to mariners of the time. These maps challenge our assumptions about the extent of ancient exploration. Were these mere coincidences, the result of imaginative speculation, or do they point to voyages that mainstream history has ignored or intentionally omitted? What makes these maps especially intriguing is not just their accuracy, but the sources from which they were derived. The Pyre Reis map itself claims to incorporate over 20 older charts, some of which are believed to have originated with lost Phoenician navigators. If true, this suggests an even older tradition of mapping the world, a chain of knowledge passed down through centuries, carefully guarded and updated with each voyage. Imagine fleets setting sail, guided by charts drawn hundreds of years before, crossing oceans with knowledge that vanished from mainstream memory only to reappear centuries later. It challenges the idea that history is linear and complete, suggesting instead a hidden layer of human accomplishment. Maps are more than just tools. They're narratives of human understanding and imagination. When a coastline appears centuries before it should have been discovered, it forces us to reconsider the story of exploration. Was there a lost voyage, a fleet that reached lands before official records, whose knowledge made its way onto these charts? Could the sailors of antiquity have glimpsed continents that would later be discovered anew, their achievements obscured by time and political agendas? These questions are not idle speculation. They arise from careful analysis of the maps themselves. The precision, the consistent depiction of topography, and the inclusion of navigational hazards all point to first-hand observation rather than guesswork. Beyond Pyre Reis, there are other maps that defy expectations. The Chinese Maokuan map, part of the Ming Maritime Atlas, charts Southeast Asia, the Indian Ocean, and beyond with astonishing detail. Similarly, early European maps occasionally depict islands or coastlines that have no known counterpart, sometimes even contradicting later maps compiled after centuries of supposedly complete exploration. Scholars debate the sources of these anomalies, suggesting lost manuscripts, oral knowledge, or even cryptic transmissions from civilizations now vanished. The result is a puzzle that combines geography, history, and the tantalizing possibility of lost voyages. The implications of these maps extend far beyond curiosity. They suggest an ancient, global network of knowledge and exploration. If navigators in the Mediterranean, Asia, or Polynesia could reach distant lands and chart them with accuracy, it means that the narrative of isolated civilizations slowly discovering the world is incomplete. There were likely networks of exchange, maritime, intellectual, and possibly even secretive, that allowed knowledge to travel across oceans long before the age of European expansion. Some historians even speculate that secret guilds or orders preserved this information, choosing whom to teach and what to share, creating a deliberate veil of mystery around certain discoveries. Maps also speak to the human desire to make sense of the unknown. In some cases, speculative or mythical islands were included, blending imagination with observation. But when islands and coastlines appear with astonishingly precise measurements, the line between myth and reality blurs. These are the breadcrumbs of ancient voyages, subtle hints that someone crossed oceans and returned, leaving evidence that survives in ink and parchment. For the modern explorer or historian, these maps are invitations to reconstruct journeys that might otherwise remain invisible, tracing the paths of sailors whose names are forgotten, but whose journeys echo through centuries. As we follow these enigmatic charts, the question becomes urgent. Who were these explorers, and why did their discoveries vanish from mainstream memory? Were they ordinary sailors, gifted navigators, or fleets sent on missions of empire, trade, or curiosity? And why did later generations fail to recognize or preserve their achievements? The maps suggest answers, but only partially, leaving us in a space between history and speculation, fact and mystery. Ultimately, these maps serve as both guides and provocations. They challenge us to look beyond the accepted narrative of exploration and consider the possibility that human beings reached distant lands long before official records acknowledge it. Each coastline drawn, each island charted, is a testament to courage, curiosity, and knowledge, a whisper from the past that demands attention. As we continue our journey, these maps will be crucial clues, helping us trace the paths of lost fleets and forgotten voyagers, leading us deeper into a story that mainstream history has only hinted at. Long before the age of global empires and recorded exploration, whispers of a fleet that sailed into the unknown have persisted across cultures and centuries. This was not just a single ship, but a collection of vessels, meticulously constructed and manned by seasoned sailors who dared to navigate uncharted waters. Legend suggests that this fleet vanished from the historical record, leaving no official trace. Yet fragments of their journey survive in stories, maps, and artifacts that hint at extraordinary discoveries. It is in these elusive threads that the mystery of the Lost Voyage begins to take shape. The origins of this fleet are shrouded in ambiguity. Some accounts point to the Mediterranean, where Phoenician merchants and explorers were known to push beyond familiar coasts in search of trade and knowledge. Others hint at fleets launched from the Far East, perhaps under the auspices of ambitious Chinese admirals, their massive junks capable of traversing the Indian Ocean and beyond. Nor should we overlook the North Atlantic, where Norse sagas speak of longships crossing vast oceans, encountering lands that would not enter European consciousness for centuries. In every tradition, the pattern is similar. Daring sailors venture farther than history suggests possible, and the world they encounter remains almost entirely invisible to later chroniclers. The fleet itself is described in fragments: the size of the ships, the nature of their crew, the goods they carried, often combining fact, legend, and exaggeration. Some tales describe vessels large enough to transport hundreds of men, laden with food, water, and supplies for months at sea. Others speak of smaller, more agile ships capable of hugging coastlines and exploring hidden bays. These descriptions vary across cultures, yet a striking consistency emerges. These were no ordinary voyages. They required careful planning, advanced navigation, and an extraordinary willingness to face the unknown. The human element adds a layer of fascination. Imagine the sailors themselves, men and women trained from youth in the arts of seamanship, celestial navigation, and survival. They would have known the risks: storms that could shatter wooden hulls, currents that could drag ships off course, diseases that could decimate crews. Yet they sailed anyway, driven by ambition, duty, curiosity, or perhaps a mixture of all three. Some legends suggest they carried secret knowledge, maps, or treasures that made their journeys even more significant than mere exploration. Others hint at motives lost to time: diplomatic missions, religious quests, or attempts to claim unknown lands for distant rulers. Accounts of encounters along the way are equally mysterious. In some sagas, sailors reported strange coastlines, populated by unfamiliar peoples with unknown customs, or islands that vanished as suddenly as they appeared. There are tales of riches, strange flora and fauna, and signs of civilizations that seem inexplicably advanced. These encounters, recorded in fragmentary logs or oral tradition, blur the line between myth and reality. Were these embellishments meant to inspire awe, or do they reflect genuine discoveries that mainstream history later overlooked or suppressed? The fleet's disappearance adds a further layer of intrigue. Some believe the ships were lost to storms, swallowed by the merciless seas they sought to conquer. Others speculate that the fleet reached distant lands but was deliberately hidden from record keepers, its accomplishments erased for political, economic, or religious reasons. There is also the tantalizing theory that survivors integrated into local populations, leaving subtle but enduring traces in language, culture, and genetics. Each of these possibilities heightens the sense of mystery, suggesting that history may contain gaps far larger than commonly acknowledged. Legends from multiple regions provide overlapping clues. Mediterranean sources speak of fleets disappearing along unknown coasts. Polynesian traditions describe sudden appearances of strangers who brought knowledge of distant lands. Chinese records hint at maritime ventures that vanish after brief mentions in official logs. Individually, these stories might seem disconnected or fanciful, but taken together, they form a compelling pattern, a shadowy network of exploration, hinting at a fleet that may have sailed farther than anyone dared to imagine. Artifacts and indirect evidence further complicate the picture. Coins, tools, or pottery found in locations far from their supposed origin suggest contact between civilizations separated by vast oceans. While mainstream historians often dismiss these as anomalies or coincidences, they resonate with the stories of the Lost Fleet, implying journeys that were deliberate and far-reaching rather than accidental. Each fragmentary piece of evidence strengthens the possibility that this fleet did exist and that its voyages were both audacious and historically significant. Perhaps the most haunting aspect is the deliberate ambiguity in historical records. The fleet is rarely named, and its sailors are mostly anonymous. They are remembered only in whispers, in maps with unexplained coastlines, in legends passed down orally through generations. This absence of concrete documentation has fueled speculation for centuries. Why would such daring expeditions be erased from the narrative? Were they threats to prevailing powers, inconvenient truths for later chroniclers, or simply casualties of time? Whatever the reason, the lack of clarity only deepens the allure. In tracing the legend of a lost fleet, we begin to see a pattern: the convergence of ambition, knowledge, and mystery. These were sailors who operated at the edge of human possibility, venturing into realms that history has largely ignored. Their story is not just about ships and navigation. It is about human courage, curiosity, and the desire to reach beyond the known world. As we continue, the next pieces of evidence, from maps, artifacts, and mysterious landfalls, will allow us to follow their path, reconstructing a journey that may have reached continents and cultures long before recorded history acknowledged them. Scattered across continents, tucked away in remote ruins, or buried beneath layers of soil and sand, lie artifacts that defy explanation. These are objects whose origin, purpose, or placement challenges the neat narrative of recorded history. Some appear where they should not be. Some display craftsmanship beyond their supposed era, and others hint at cross-continental knowledge that mainstream archaeology often struggles to explain. Collectively, they whisper of a world in which explorers, perhaps from a lost fleet, ventured far beyond familiar lands, leaving behind tangible echoes of their journeys. Consider the strange inscriptions and carvings found in the Americas, Africa, and Oceania. Some of these symbols bear resemblance to Old World scripts, yet appear in regions historically considered isolated. Ancient petroglyphs, for instance, depict figures, ships, or tools that seem to suggest knowledge of distant technologies or maritime ventures. While skeptics attribute these to coincidence or independent development, the consistency and distribution of such symbols across vast geographies raise compelling questions. Could they represent a common visual language carried by voyagers who crossed oceans centuries before recorded history acknowledged it? Then there are artifacts whose craftsmanship is perplexing. Metalwork found in remote coastal areas sometimes demonstrates techniques known in the Old World, but supposedly unknown to local civilizations at the time. Pottery styles, stone tools, and ceremonial objects occasionally mirror designs from regions thousands of miles away. These items are more than curiosities. They are tangible evidence of contact, proof that cultures, separated by oceans, may have exchanged knowledge, materials, or even people. The implications are profound, suggesting that the Lost Fleet may have left behind artifacts that subtly influenced local societies. Some discoveries are even more enigmatic. Tiny metal or stone objects, sometimes buried in ceremonial contexts, appear to have no immediate practical function. Are they ritualistic, symbolic, or perhaps markers of navigation, left deliberately to signal presence or claim territory? Scholars debate their purpose, but their very existence hints at voyages undertaken with intention and planning, not random drift or accidental landfalls. Each object serves as a breadcrumb, a hint that someone traveled far, observed keenly, and left behind evidence of their passage, even if only subtle traces survive today. Shipwrecks also offer tantalizing clues. In shallow coastal waters and submerged bays, remnants of vessels appear that do not conform neatly to known local shipbuilding traditions. Some show advanced construction techniques, suggesting knowledge transferred from distant lands. Timber types, fastenings, and hull designs hint at experimentation or hybridization, as though mariners combined what they knew with what they discovered abroad. These sunken vessels, silent beneath the waves, are relics of ambition and skill, marking paths that have largely been forgotten but remain etched into the physical world. Even more fascinating are the cross-cultural motifs that appear on artifacts separated by oceans. Symbols resembling stars, navigational tools, or celestial charts are found in both Polynesia and the Mediterranean. Religious or ceremonial objects sometimes depict journeys, ships, or waves, suggesting that the act of travel itself held significance beyond commerce or exploration. It implies that these lost voyages were not merely practical endeavors, but part of a worldview that valued discovery, connection, and perhaps even secrecy. Knowledge was power, and some of it may have been deliberately encoded into the objects left behind. The placement of artifacts is equally mysterious. Some are found far inland, well beyond any reasonable coastal landing. Could this indicate that explorers penetrated deep into territories, trading, or interacting with indigenous populations? Or perhaps these items were carried along over generations, leaving clues that later researchers would struggle to interpret. Either way, the scattered nature of these artifacts suggests intentionality. The markings, construction, and locations were deliberate, forming a subtle web of evidence that hints at journeys erased from official history. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect is the relationship between artifacts and legends. Oral histories often mention strangers, pale visitors, or unknown fleets arriving long before recorded colonization. When combined with material evidence, these stories take on new weight. Artifacts become proof points that these legends were not purely myth, but memories of real voyages, encoded in physical form and passed down through time. They hint at interactions that were fleeting yet impactful, shaping the evolution of cultures and the spread of ideas in ways mainstream history seldom acknowledges. Artifacts also serve as silent witnesses to human ambition. They speak of sailors, artisans, and navigators who dared to cross oceans that seemed endless, who carried knowledge of distant lands in their hands and minds. They remind us that history is not only written in books, but embedded in the objects humans create, in the symbols they leave, and in the subtle traces of interaction that survive millennia. Each artifact, no matter how small or mysterious, is a window into a world of courage, curiosity, and exploration that predates recorded accounts. In the context of the Lost Voyage, these artifacts and symbols form the breadcrumbs we follow to reconstruct a story otherwise absent from official records. They link continents, cultures, and centuries, suggesting that someone sailed, explored, and perhaps even settled in lands before history acknowledged them. As we continue, the next sections will examine the tools, techniques, and celestial knowledge that made such journeys possible, bringing us closer to understanding how these enigmatic voyages were accomplished and why their traces remain both subtle and profound. Long before Columbus set foot on the shores of the Americas, there are tantalizing hints that other explorers may have already reached these lands, leaving traces that challenge the official historical timeline. These pre-Columbian landfalls are scattered and fragmentary, hidden in artifacts, DNA evidence, and ancient structures, yet they whisper of voyages that reached distant continents long before European discovery. The story of these early arrivals is a puzzle, with pieces scattered across oceans, jungles, and archives, waiting to be assembled. One of the most compelling clues comes from archaeological findings along the coasts of North and South America. Stone tools, metal implements, and unusual construction techniques suggest contact with civilizations far beyond the Americas' shores. In some locations, settlements appear abruptly, with advanced agricultural practices and architectural styles that hint at external influence. Mainstream historians often attribute these anomalies to independent development, yet the precision and similarity to Old World techniques are difficult to dismiss entirely. Could these be remnants of early fleets, long forgotten, whose crews left tangible marks on the lands they briefly occupied? Genetic evidence adds another layer of intrigue. Studies of indigenous populations have occasionally revealed markers that suggest contact with peoples from distant regions, sometimes centuries before Columbus. While these findings are often debated or downplayed, they provide tantalizing hints of ancient transoceanic interactions. The idea that sailors from Asia, the Middle East, or even the Mediterranean may have reached the Americas is supported not only by genetics, but by linguistic anomalies and cultural parallels that defy conventional explanations. Each of these threads, though subtle, points to a prehistory of exploration that mainstream narratives tend to overlook. Legends and oral traditions also speak to possible pre-Columbian contact. In the Americas, stories of pale-skinned visitors or advanced strangers appear across multiple indigenous cultures. These tales are often dismissed as myth or misinterpretation, yet the consistency across different regions is striking. Similarly, European and Asian legends speak of distant lands encountered by sailors who never returned home, their achievements fading into obscurity. When combined with physical evidence, these narratives suggest a network of voyages that transcended continents, hinting at human curiosity and daring far earlier than official history records. In South America, particularly in the Andean and Amazonian regions, some structures and artifacts defy chronological expectations. Advanced stonework, unusual metallurgy, and navigational markers hint at knowledge that may have traveled with visiting explorers. The presence of Old World crops or livestock, debated among scholars, adds another layer of complexity. While it is impossible to reconstruct the full story with certainty, the accumulation of evidence forms a pattern, one in which explorers may have reached distant shores, influencing local cultures in subtle but lasting ways. The Caribbean islands provide additional clues. Archaeologists have discovered artifacts that resemble Old World objects, including copper tools and beads, which appear far earlier than known European colonization. Some scholars speculate that these could be remnants of Norse expeditions, possibly linking to Vinland or even earlier journeys for Mediterranean or African sailors. The challenge lies in separating myth from reality, yet the convergence of evidence across time and space strengthens the possibility of pre-Columbian landfalls that mainstream history largely ignores. It is important to consider the risks these ancient voyagers faced. Crossing vast oceans without modern instruments required extraordinary skill, courage, and a deep understanding of natural signs, from stars to ocean currents to bird migration patterns. One miscalculation could lead to disaster, leaving no survivors to record the journey. This might explain why some evidence is fleeting. Entire crews could have been lost at sea, leaving only subtle traces behind. Yet even in failure, these voyages left an imprint on history, one that modern scholars are only beginning to piece together. Artifacts recovered from remote coastal areas sometimes defy conventional dating methods. Pottery, tools, and even remnants of wooden ships suggest technological capabilities consistent with Old World civilizations. Carbon dating occasionally reveals surprisingly early timelines, raising questions about who might have reached these lands and when. Each discovery fuels speculation. Were these the results of chance drift voyages, planned expeditions, or secret missions? The answers remain elusive, but the evidence challenges the notion that the Americas were entirely isolated before European contact. Another fascinating aspect is the possibility of intentional exploration for trade, knowledge, or diplomacy. Ancient civilizations may have sought resources, new lands, or alliances across oceans, not unlike the motivations of later explorers. Maritime prowess, combined with curiosity and strategic ambition, could have propelled fleets far beyond familiar coasts. Maps, oral histories, and scattered artifacts suggest that these journeys were not entirely accidental, but guided by skill, planning, and a remarkable understanding of the natural world. Ultimately, the shadows of these pre-Columbian landfalls force us to reconsider the simplicity of the historical record. They hint at a world far more interconnected than textbooks suggest, a history in which daring explorers reached distant lands and left traces that have survived, if only just for us to uncover. These whispers from the past remind us that human beings have always been driven by curiosity and the desire to explore, crossing oceans and encountering the unknown long before official history gives them credit. As we move forward, the next sections will examine mysterious artifacts and symbols left behind, the tools of navigation that enabled such journeys, and the ways in which these traces challenge the neat timelines presented by mainstream scholarship. Each clue brings us closer to understanding a lost voyage, a journey that reached lands before recorded history and left subtle yet undeniable imprints that continue to intrigue and mystify to this day. Before the age of compasses, satellites, and electronic charts, sailors relied on the sky itself as their guide. The stars, sun, moon, and subtle celestial phenomena formed a map that could be read by those trained in the ancient and often secretive art of navigation. For the lost voyagers who may have reached distant lands before recorded history, this knowledge was not just a tool, it was a lifeline. Mastery of celestial navigation required intense training, observation, and understanding of patterns that repeat yet shift in ways imperceptible to the untrained eye. Imagine a night at sea, the horizon a thin, wavering line between ocean and sky. Sailors stand at the helm, eyes fixed on the stars, reading constellations for direction and distance. Each star is a signal, each constellation a clockwork in motion, guiding the fleet across thousands of miles. Ancient navigators memorized the rising and setting points of key stars, noted the behavior of celestial bodies across seasons, and understood the moon's influence on tides. This was knowledge passed down orally and through experience, guarded by elders, priests, and maritime guilds. It was both practical and sacred, a secret that determined life or death on the open sea. The Polynesians exemplified this mastery. Their navigation methods combined observation of stars with deep awareness of ocean swells, cloud formations, and bird migrations. They could detect islands hundreds of miles away by interpreting subtle cues invisible to the casual eye. This required not only acute observation, but also a profound understanding of environmental rhythms. Every voyage was a blend of art and science, intuition and data. Modern experiments have confirmed the effectiveness of these techniques, proving that such long-distance navigation was not only possible, but highly reliable. In the Mediterranean, Phoenician and later Greek mariners relied on similar principles, albeit adapted to different waters. Star charts, coastal markers, and seasonal winds allowed them to traverse the Mediterranean and Atlantic edges with astonishing accuracy. Some historians even suggest that Phoenicians circumnavigated Africa centuries before the age of European exploration, their knowledge recorded on maps that later inspired figures like Pyre Reis. The secrecy surrounding this knowledge hints at its strategic value. Sailors who understood the seas controlled trade, influence, and even political power. China, too, developed advanced navigational knowledge long before Europe's maritime age. The Ming dynasty's treasure fleets, led by Admiral Zheng He, sailed massive junks across the Indian Ocean to distant lands. These expeditions required careful coordination, understanding of monsoon winds, and precise calculations of latitude using early instruments like the south-pointing needle and star observations. While some records are lost or incomplete, surviving logs suggest a level of sophistication in navigation that rivaled or exceeded contemporary European practices. The transmission of this knowledge was often deliberate and controlled. Secret societies, guilds, and royal courts sometimes restricted access to navigational wisdom, treating it almost as esoteric knowledge rather than mere technique. In this sense, the Lost Voyage may not have been simply an exploratory mission. It could have been a deliberate undertaking by those entrusted with guarding sacred or strategic knowledge. Access to maps, stars, and sailing techniques would have determined who could venture successfully into the unknown and who would perish trying. Celestial navigation also intersects with mythology and symbolism. Ancient cultures often imbued stars and planets with spiritual significance, blending empirical observation with cosmological interpretation. Sailors learned to read these signs not only for direction but for omens, understanding that the movements of celestial bodies could reflect or influence their journey. This dual aspect of navigation, practical and symbolic, suggests that the Lost Voyagers operated within a framework that combined science, ritual, and secret knowledge, giving them an edge in journeys that would have seemed impossible to others. The implications of mastering such techniques are profound. Voyages that spanned thousands of miles, reached previously unknown lands, and returned with goods or knowledge were achievable, even in times when conventional history suggests otherwise. Celestial navigation provided a reliable guide across uncharted oceans, enabling explorers to survive, adapt, and thrive in conditions that would challenge the most experienced modern sailors. This skill could explain how the Lost Fleet, or multiple fleets, reached continents far from their points of origin, leaving evidence that has survived in fragments, myths, and enigmatic maps. Understanding these techniques also illuminates why traces of the Lost Voyages are subtle. Sailors equipped with knowledge of stars and currents could land with precision, avoid hazards, and navigate back to familiar ports, all while leaving minimal evidence for those who followed. The combination of secrecy, skill, and deliberate record-keeping created an invisible network of exploration. Only now, through careful analysis of artifacts, maps, and genetic or cultural clues, can we begin to reconstruct the paths these voyagers took. In the context of our journey, celestial navigation and secret knowledge provide the mechanism that makes the Lost Voyage plausible. They reveal how fleets could have ventured far beyond recorded history, guided by a mastery of the natural world and safeguarded knowledge. As we continue, the next sections will explore dramatic disappearances, esoteric records, and geographical anomalies that together illuminate the shadowy trail of explorers who reached lands long before mainstream history acknowledged them. The ocean has always been a realm of uncertainty, a vast expanse where the line between triumph and tragedy is razor-thin. For the Lost Fleet, the ultimate mystery lies not only in where they went, but in why they vanished from history. Legends speak of ships swallowed by storms, fleets scattered by unknown currents, or entire crews disappearing without a trace. These stories, repeated across cultures and centuries, create an aura of enigma that has persisted in the margins of historical memory. Ancient accounts from Mediterranean sailors describe fleets setting out with ambition and promise, only to vanish along distant coastlines or disappear in open waters. Some say that entire armadas were lost to sudden tempests, waves towering like mountains, winds howling like spirits of the deep. Survivors, if any, may have been few, their tales fading into oral tradition before they could be recorded. Yet echoes of these voyages linger in maps, artifacts, and fragmented manuscripts, hinting that something extraordinary occurred, something that mainstream history has failed to fully acknowledge. The Norse sagas provide another layer of intrigue. Vikings who ventured west from Greenland to what they called Vinland described encounters with strange lands and peoples, sometimes disappearing for decades from European consciousness. While these expeditions are documented in fragments, they exemplify the dangers and unpredictability of long voyages. Ships could be driven off course by storms, currents, or miscalculations, leaving explorers stranded on unfamiliar coasts. In many ways, the story of the Lost Fleet mirrors these Norse experiences, suggesting that the ocean itself was a silent actor in shaping human history, capable of erasing even the most daring journeys. The notion of deliberate disappearance also appears in some legends. Certain fleets may have been sent with secretive purposes, diplomatic missions, clandestine trade, or even religious undertakings, and their records suppressed or destroyed for political reasons. Some historians speculate that ruling powers or rival factions sought to erase evidence of these journeys to maintain control over trade routes, territories, or knowledge. If true, it would mean that the fleet's disappearance was not purely accidental, but intertwined with intrigue, secrecy, and perhaps even conspiracy. Cultural memories further complicate the story. Indigenous traditions in the Americas, the Pacific Islands, and Africa sometimes recount the arrival of unknown ships, visitors with advanced knowledge, or fleets that came and went mysteriously. These oral histories often describe encounters that were brief yet impactful, exchanges of goods, knowledge, or rituals. The ephemeral nature of these interactions could explain why written records are sparse. When combined with the physical evidence of artifacts, symbols, and anomalous structures, these legends form a compelling narrative of explorers who reached distant lands but remained largely invisible to the historical record. Shipwrecks add another layer to the enigma. Submerged remnants of vessels, found centuries later in remote bays or coastal areas, occasionally display construction techniques inconsistent with local practices. Some appear to have been purpose-built for long voyages, their hulls reinforced and their designs optimized for endurance. These discoveries suggest that fleets could have traveled vast distances, yet succumbed to natural hazards, leaving little but submerged traces and the occasional artifact to hint at their passage. Each wreck is a silent testimony to human ambition, skill, and vulnerability in the face of nature's vastness. The psychological dimension of disappearance is also striking. For those who sailed into the unknown, the ocean was a realm of both wonder and terror. Navigators faced isolation, extreme weather, scarcity of resources, and the constant risk of misjudging their position. Stories of fleets that never returned serve as reminders of the immense courage required to traverse uncharted waters. They also highlight the fragility of memory and history, how easily entire ventures, no matter how significant, can fade into legend when documentation is lost or suppressed. An additional layer of mystery arises from reports of ships appearing in distant regions with no record of their origin. Some accounts describe European-style vessels or Asian junks appearing in the Americas or the Pacific centuries before formal colonization. These anomalies fuel speculation that parts of the Lost Fleet may have survived by integrating into local populations, leaving behind subtle cultural imprints rather than formal records. It is a haunting possibility. Fleets reaching new lands, influencing societies, and yet disappearing from the pages of history, leaving only whispers and traces for later generations to uncover. Ultimately, the legend of the disappearing fleet is a tale of uncertainty, courage, and human ambition. It reminds us that history is often incomplete, shaped not only by what was achieved, but by what was lost, erased, or forgotten. The fleet that vanished into oblivion embodies the tension between exploration and disappearance, between human mastery and the ocean's indifference. As we continue, the next sections will examine geographical anomalies, mysterious islands, and the evidence that hints at the enduring influence of these lost voyages, revealing that even in disappearance, the fleet left an indelible mark on the world. Across the globe, scattered landforms and coastal features hint at voyages that mainstream history struggles to explain. These geographical anomalies, islands that appear and vanish in records, coastlines depicted with unusual accuracy, and features that defy the expected timeline of discovery, form a subtle but compelling trail pointing toward lost paths of exploration. They are the silent markers of journeys taken long before recorded history acknowledged them, whispering of navigators who ventured farther than conventional scholarship allows. One striking example is the so-called Phantom Islands of early maps. Islands like Frisland, Thule, and Antilia appear in charts from the 14th and 15th centuries, only to vanish in later surveys. While some were dismissed as cartographic errors or myths, others exhibit coordinates and descriptions precise enough to suggest that sailors once observed them firsthand. Were these islands temporarily visible due to shifting sands, volcanic activity, or tidal anomalies? Or do they represent distant lands reached by fleets that were later forgotten? Each anomaly forces us to reconsider the accuracy and sources of medieval and early modern cartography. Coastal representations in early maps also raise questions. The Pyrie Reis map, for instance, depicts parts of South America and possibly Antarctica with remarkable accuracy. Similarly, other pre-modern charts show coastlines and islands long before their official discovery. These anomalies cannot be easily dismissed as speculation or imagination. They suggest knowledge transferred across generations, possibly originating from fleets that ventured into uncharted waters. Such maps imply that sailors had observed and recorded distant lands centuries before they entered mainstream consciousness, leaving a cartographic footprint that survives even when written records do not. Some anomalies are even more subtle, hidden in the alignment of islands, atolls, and reefs. Polynesian navigators, for example, relied on precise knowledge of currents, wave patterns, and star alignments to locate islands thousands of miles apart. Modern scholars have confirmed the accuracy of these traditional methods, noting that many islands could only be discovered through careful observation and repeated voyages. The presence of similarly precise measurements in maps from other regions hints at a shared or parallel knowledge of navigation, a network of expertise that predates modern exploration. In addition to islands, inland anomalies provide tantalizing clues. Archaeological surveys occasionally reveal settlements, agricultural terraces, or stone structures situated far from any logical coastal approach. Some of these locations align with potential landing sites inferred from anomalous maps, suggesting that explorers may have penetrated deep into territories, leaving subtle evidence of their presence. These inland traces, often dismissed as local innovation, gain new significance when cross-referenced with other evidence, forming a faint but discernible trail of lost paths. Geological anomalies also play a role. Rising and falling sea levels over centuries could explain why certain land masses were accessible to ancient mariners but later submerged or altered, leaving only partial records in maps and oral traditions. Coastal erosion, volcanic activity, and shifting river deltas further complicate the picture, obscuring the evidence of early landfalls. Yet even when physical traces disappear, the anomalies persist in maps, legends, and cultural memory, hinting at voyages that defy conventional timelines. Some explorers suggest that these anomalies were intentionally recorded to guide future voyagers. Strategic placement of islands, reefs, and safe harbors on maps may have served as navigational markers for fleets repeating the journey or seeking trade routes. If so, the lost paths were not random but carefully planned, leaving behind a trail visible only to those who possess the requisite knowledge to read it. This deliberate encoding of geographical data elevates these anomalies from mere curiosity to evidence of advanced maritime strategy and foresight. Cross-referencing anomalies across regions reveals surprising patterns. Coastal features in the Mediterranean, Atlantic, and Pacific sometimes share similarities in mapping style, alignment, or depiction of hazards. These recurring patterns suggest that knowledge of navigation and geography may have been transmitted across oceans, either through fleets, traders, or secretive societies dedicated to preserving maritime wisdom. In this sense, the anomalies are not isolated errors but components of a larger, interconnected system of exploration. Finally, the human element is crucial in interpreting these anomalies. Each coastline, island, and reef represents a decision made by sailors: where to land, how to approach, and what to record. The anomalies are fingerprints of their voyages, subtle evidence that humans reached lands long before official recognition. They remind us that history is often incomplete, shaped not just by what is recorded, but by what survives in maps, memory, and material traces. By following these geographical anomalies, we trace the invisible paths of fleets that navigated with skill, daring, and perhaps secret knowledge, paths that predate the official narrative of exploration. As we continue, the next sections will explore mysterious inscriptions, enigmatic texts, and cryptic chronicles that corroborate these lost paths, weaving together evidence from multiple sources to illuminate the full story of a voyage that may have reached lands before recorded history. Maps are more than tools. They're the visual embodiment of knowledge, exploration, and imagination. Throughout history, cartography has captured both the known world and the tantalizing edges of uncertainty, places where explorers dared to venture, but official records failed to follow. Ancient maps, some discovered in forgotten archives or private collections, suggest that fleets reached lands long before formal history recorded them. They provide a remarkable window into the geographical understanding of past civilizations and hint at maritime achievements that challenge mainstream timelines. Some maps are startlingly precise, depicting coastlines, islands, and ocean currents that were officially unknown at the time of their creation. The Pyre Reese map of 1513, for instance, illustrates parts of South America with surprising accuracy, while simultaneously depicting land masses and features that contemporary scholars struggled to explain. Such maps suggest that earlier voyages, now lost to history, provided detailed geographic knowledge that was later transmitted, recorded, and occasionally hidden. These cartographic anomalies reveal the existence of explorers capable of long-distance navigation and meticulous observation, leaving traces of their journeys in lines, shapes, and coordinates. The techniques used in ancient cartography further reinforce the possibility of pre-recorded voyages. Some maps demonstrate knowledge of longitude, ocean currents, and seasonal wind patterns far beyond what was previously believed achievable. Cartographers sometimes included annotations indicating safe harbors, reef locations, or prevailing winds, information only obtainable through direct observation at sea. The presence of such details implies that fleets not only traveled vast distances, but also possessed systematic methods for recording and transmitting geographic intelligence. In some cases, maps contain symbols, codes, or inscriptions that suggest deliberate obfuscation. Islands and landforms may be named in cryptic terms, routes partially erased, or annotations written in esoteric language. These features hint at the possibility that maps were intended for a select audience, trained navigators, secret societies, or rulers, rather than for general public knowledge. The encoded nature of such maps aligns with broader patterns of suppression observed in other forms of evidence, from manuscripts to artifacts, suggesting that maritime knowledge was closely guarded. Comparative studies of maps across regions reveal surprising consistencies. Coastal outlines in Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and Asian maps occasionally depict features that align with distant continents, implying shared knowledge or the transmission of information across civilizations. The repeated depiction of these landforms, sometimes centuries before formal discovery, strengthens the case that fleets reached these regions and communicated their findings, either directly or through intermediaries. Ancient cartography thus becomes a tool not only for navigation, but also for historical reconstruction. Maps also provide insight into cultural perceptions of the world. They often blend observed geography with mythology, legend, and symbolic representation. Islands described as paradises, seas labeled with fantastical creatures, or routes aligned with celestial bodies serve dual purposes, preserving factual navigational knowledge while embedding it within culturally comprehensible frameworks. By decoding these elements, modern researchers can distinguish between metaphor and empirical observation, revealing the underlying realities of ancient exploration. The survival of maps over centuries, despite wars, natural disasters, and deliberate suppression, is remarkable. Many were copied, preserved in private collections, or hidden in archives inaccessible to the general public. Some maps only emerged centuries later, prompting reconsideration of historical timelines and voyages. The act of preservation itself indicates the perceived value of these documents, underscoring that knowledge of distant lands and maritime routes was both rare and strategically important. The integration of maps with other evidence, artifacts, shipwrecks, and chronicles, creates a multidimensional picture of lost voyages. When geographical features depicted in maps correspond with physical discoveries, they validate the accuracy and significance of these early cartographic efforts. For instance, islands shown in maps of the 15th century that match archaeological sites in remote locations suggest that fleets reached these lands and recorded them for posterity. These correlations transform maps from speculative tools into tangible evidence of advanced exploration. Cartography also reflects technological innovation. The instruments, measurements, and observational methods used to create these maps indicate a sophisticated understanding of the natural world. Some maps suggest knowledge of magnetic variation, celestial navigation, and triangulation, skills necessary for accurate long-distance voyages. By studying these maps, historians gain insight into the intellectual and technical capabilities of ancient navigators, revealing a level of sophistication previously underestimated. Ultimately, ancient maps challenged the linear narrative of exploration. They imply that fleets traversed oceans, reached distant lands, and recorded their discoveries centuries before the voyages officially recognized by history. These maps preserve the memory of human curiosity, ingenuity, and ambition, showing that our ancestors not only imagined distant worlds, but also actively engaged with them. By decoding these cartographic treasures, modern researchers uncover the routes, strategies, and achievements of voyagers whose contributions were deliberately obscured or forgotten. In conclusion, ancient maps are far more than historical artifacts. They are keys to understanding lost voyages and suppressed knowledge. Their precision, anomalies, and encoded information reveal the scope and sophistication of maritime exploration long before mainstream history acknowledged it. By tracing forgotten routes through cartography, we gain a glimpse into the audacity, skill, and determination of fleets that reached distant lands, reshaping our understanding of human achievement and the true extent of pre-recorded exploration. Long before formal records and official histories were meticulously maintained, eyewitnesses and chroniclers often captured fragments of human achievement in narrative form. Some of these accounts describe fleets and voyages that appear to vanish without a trace, vessels that reached distant lands long before recognized exploration, and navigators whose knowledge exceeded the limits of contemporary understanding. While many of these chronicles were dismissed as exaggeration or myth, a careful analysis reveals recurring patterns and astonishing consistencies, suggesting they contain genuine historical truth hidden beneath layers of interpretation. Throughout history, travelers, monks, sailors, and merchants recorded unusual encounters that hint at voyages far ahead of accepted timelines. Coastal monasteries often preserve marginalia, describing ships without origin appearing on foggy horizons or cargoes of exotic goods arriving unexpectedly. Merchants' letters reference strange coins, fabrics, and metals from lands unknown to them. Local officials, charged with reporting unusual events, occasionally mention fleets arriving and departing under circumstances that leave them perplexed, ships that never return to their original ports, or crews that disappeared entirely. These accounts, scattered and fragmented, hint at deliberate, long-range exploration that mainstream history has largely ignored. Some chroniclers provide strikingly specific details. They describe hull designs, navigational instruments, or sailing techniques unfamiliar to their contemporaries, often attributing these innovations to travelers from distant civilizations. Ships capable of surviving open ocean voyages, equipped with advanced steering mechanisms or knowledge of seasonal wind patterns, appear in accounts centuries before such technology was formally recognized. These narratives suggest that ancient mariners had access to sophisticated maritime knowledge and that it was deliberately or circumstantially withheld from conventional records. Maritime logs from explorers of various civilizations reveal anomalies in routes and distances traveled. Entries often mention landmarks, islands, or currents that were not officially discovered until centuries later. Occasionally, descriptions align with physical evidence. Submerged structures, shipwrecks, or unusual artifacts found far from their known point of origin. These correlations lend credence to the idea that these lost voyages were deliberate, organized, and meticulously documented, even if much of this documentation was later suppressed or lost. Eyewitness testimony sometimes includes cultural and technological exchange. Chroniclers recount interactions with foreign populations, detailing traded goods, learned techniques, or strange rituals. These accounts hint at complex encounters, not simple accidental landfalls. For example, some texts describe the arrival of navigators who taught local populations new fishing methods, introduced advanced agricultural tools, or shared celestial navigation knowledge. These narratives reveal not just discovery, but meaningful contact and transmission of knowledge, leaving a tangible imprint on societies that would otherwise remain unrecorded. Legends of ghost fleets or disappearing navigators often accompany these accounts. Some chroniclers describe entire convoys that vanished into fog or storms, never to be seen again, yet occasionally leaving behind relics, maps, or settlements. These mysterious disappearances are consistent across different regions and time periods, suggesting that fleets may have operated under protocols designed to conceal their routes, knowledge, and achievements. Disappearance, whether accidental or intentional, ensured that critical information remained protected while simultaneously creating a historical void that modern researchers now attempt to fill. One particularly fascinating element is the recurrence of similar voyages in distant cultures. Accounts from the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific Islands often describe seafaring feats that are strikingly analogous. Fleets capable of extended oceanic travel, navigators skilled in celestial guidance, and vessels built for endurance. The repetition of these motifs across cultures implies either remarkable parallel development or, more intriguingly, a network of knowledge exchange across continents, facilitated by fleets whose achievements were systematically hidden from conventional history. The chroniclers also reveal the human dimension of these voyages. Their accounts describe the courage, ingenuity, and sheer resilience required to navigate uncharted waters. Storms, treacherous currents, and the unknown terrain of distant lands tested sailors' skill and endurance. Chroniclers frequently highlight the discipline, cooperation, and intelligence of crews, qualities necessary for survival during extended journeys across unpredictable seas. These narratives remind us that the fleets were not mythical, but human endeavors executed with extraordinary precision and determination. Religious and mystical interpretations often accompany these accounts, complicating their analysis. Some chroniclers frame voyages as divinely guided or attribute ships' safe passage to supernatural protection. While these embellishments may obscure factual details, they often encode information about seasonal winds, ocean currents, or navigational strategies. By interpreting allegory and symbolism carefully, researchers can decode these seemingly mystical elements to reconstruct actual routes, methods, and encounters of these lost voyages. Another notable aspect is the recurring theme of secrecy and suppression embedded in these chronicles. Accounts frequently note that voyagers' knowledge was guarded, restricted, or deliberately obscured. Some chroniclers hint at deliberate erasure of records, secret alliances, or political interference that kept these extraordinary voyages out of official history. This aligns with other evidence of deliberate suppression: maps, artifacts, and encoded manuscripts. Collectively, these elements suggest that lost voyages were not mere anomalies, but organized expeditions whose impact was systematically hidden. Some chronicles even describe the aftermath of voyages, settlements established, resources mapped, and strategic knowledge transmitted to trusted successors. In some regions, remnants of these settlements have been found archaeologically, corroborating textual accounts. Tools, building techniques, and imported materials recorded in the chronicles match physical evidence uncovered centuries later, reinforcing the notion that these accounts preserve valuable historical truth. The chroniclers, intentionally or unintentionally, left a breadcrumb trail for future generations, allowing modern researchers to reconstruct events long obscured by time. The global distribution of these accounts is striking. From Europe to the Americas, Africa, and Asia, chroniclers describe phenomena that suggest human presence far beyond what official history recognizes. Even in regions considered isolated, oral traditions echo narratives of foreign fleets, exotic trade goods, and cultural exchange, implying that long-distance voyages connected disparate populations earlier than previously thought. These narratives collectively challenge conventional timelines, suggesting a far-reaching network of exploration that predates the recognized age of discovery. Ultimately, mysterious accounts and chronicles act as a bridge between legend and historical reality. While individually incomplete, together they form a consistent pattern. Fleets traversing oceans, reaching distant lands, interacting with local populations, and sometimes vanishing from history. These narratives complement material evidence, shipwrecks, artifacts, and maps, creating a multidimensional understanding of lost voyages. The accounts also highlight the human qualities behind these feats: courage, foresight, technical skill, and adaptability. By studying these chronicles carefully, modern researchers gain insight not only into where these fleets traveled, but how they navigated, interacted with societies, and left traces that endure in maps, artifacts, and cultural memory. The chronicler's meticulous attention to detail, even when filtered through legend or mysticism, provides a roadmap for reconstructing voyages that mainstream history often ignores. In doing so, they reveal a chapter of human exploration that is richer, more ambitious, and far more interconnected than conventional narratives suggest. Ultimately, mysterious accounts serve as both a record and a warning. Much of history has been lost, suppressed, or obscured, yet fragments remain, waiting for careful interpretation. These chronicles are invitations to explore beyond conventional boundaries, to read between the lines of legend and scripture, and to recognize the extraordinary achievements of human explorers whose names and deeds have been hidden from history for centuries. By piecing together these narratives, we rediscover a world of lost voyages, daring navigation, and global interconnectedness, a hidden chapter in the story of human ambition and ingenuity. Long before maps were drawn and ships charted distant seas, human imagination and observation often manifested in prophecy, legend, and myth. Across cultures, there exists a recurring motif: seafarers embarking on voyages into the unknown, lands appearing that defy expectation, and knowledge arriving from distant, mysterious sources. These narratives, often dismissed as folklore or superstition, may in fact encode subtle truths about pre-recorded voyages, acting as cryptic markers of historical events long suppressed or forgotten. By examining prophecies and legends with a careful, analytical eye, a pattern begins to emerge, a hidden layer of evidence preserved not in archives or shipwrecks, but in memory, story, and symbolism. Many prophecies point explicitly to the arrival of strangers from across the sea, travelers bearing knowledge, wealth, or even warnings. In coastal communities of the Mediterranean, tales speak of fleets appearing where none should exist, bringing technology, agricultural techniques, or cultural practices previously unknown. In Polynesian traditions, oral histories recount sky travelers and voyagers who navigated vast stretches of ocean using knowledge of stars, tides, and winds that were far more advanced than conventional records suggest. These legends, repeated across centuries, preserve a form of experiential knowledge, encoded in metaphor, rhythm, and ritual, that hints at the existence of fleets capable of extraordinary navigation. Prophecies often serve as temporal markers, describing events that precede or coincide with maritime arrivals. Ancient texts from Middle East, South Asia, and Europe contain descriptions of omens of arrival, stars in unusual positions, comets, or changes in weather patterns that align with seasonal voyages. While these references are cryptic and symbolic, modern scholars have correlated celestial patterns with historical oceanic conditions, suggesting that what was once considered mystical may reflect careful observation by voyagers and their chroniclers. In essence, prophecy becomes a code, a way to preserve navigational knowledge, the timing of voyages, and the significance of distant lands, all hidden within the fabric of legend. Legendary accounts frequently encode geographical information. Islands described in myth, often portrayed as paradises or lands of great resources, correspond surprisingly well with real locations. Some islands are described with precise natural features, rivers, mountain ranges, or reefs that match locations known only to modern researchers through archaeological or satellite evidence. The legends may exaggerate or mythologize, but the core factual element remains. Fleets did reach these lands, and their impact was significant enough to leave a lasting imprint in local memory. Across continents, the convergence of myths describing similar phenomena suggests that these voyages were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader, interconnected pattern of exploration. Prophecies also provide insight into the social and political reception of these fleets. Many stories describe initial awe, fear, or reverence toward the arriving strangers, suggesting encounters between technologically advanced voyagers and indigenous populations. Such accounts frequently involve exchange, tools, seeds, knowledge, or cultural practices, which could easily have been misinterpreted, mythologized, or ritualized by the receiving communities. The repeated motifs of fear, respect, or deification in multiple cultures suggest that these encounters left a tangible imprint, one powerful enough to survive in oral and written tradition long after physical evidence may have decayed or been deliberately suppressed. Symbolism plays a crucial role in preserving knowledge. Many prophecies describe ships as birds of the sea or silver serpents, and navigators as star children or keepers of the wind. Such metaphorical language may have been intentionally designed to obscure practical knowledge from outsiders, while encoding operational information for initiated readers or listeners. Descriptions of celestial navigation, tidal currents, and favorable winds are often hidden within allegory, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of maritime strategy. Modern researchers who decode these symbols often find correlations with known navigational routes, reinforcing the notion that prophecy and legend functioned as a vehicle for encoded maritime intelligence. Across cultures, mythological patterns reinforce the idea of repeated contact. The existence of similar narratives in distant regions, from South America to Southeast Asia and from Polynesia to Europe, suggests that fleets reached multiple continents, carrying technology, culture, and knowledge that left lasting impressions. Tales of metalworking, agriculture, architecture, and maritime skill appear in regions where these practices were previously unknown, indicating that voyagers disseminated knowledge across vast distances. In many cases, these lessons were transmitted symbolically, preserved in ritual, storytelling, or coded documents rather than written manuals. Legends thus functioned as both memory and guide, safeguarding information against the erasure of history. Prophecies also hint at secrecy and suppression. Many narratives speak of knowledge being hidden or reserved for the few, emphasizing the importance of discretion and obedience to cosmic or divine laws. These recurring motifs parallel the deliberate encoding observed in maps, inscriptions, and artifacts, suggesting that secrecy was a consistent feature of advanced maritime knowledge. Voyagers may have deliberately obscured information to protect strategic advantages, avoid political entanglements, or safeguard technological know-how, ensuring that only those with training, initiation, or insight could interpret the evidence correctly. Modern researchers increasingly recognize that prophecies and legends can serve as a supplementary framework for uncovering lost voyages. When combined with cartography, archaeology, and material evidence, these narratives provide temporal, geographic, and social context. They help explain anomalies, unexplained artifacts, unusual shipwrecks, and cultural disruptions that correspond with reported encounters. Legends often fill the gaps left by suppressed or lost documentation, creating a multi-layered reconstruction of maritime history that is both vivid and plausible. The philosophical implications are equally profound. Prophecies remind us that knowledge can survive in forms beyond physical evidence, encoded in story, ritual, and symbolism. They reveal that human understanding of exploration, technology, and interconnectedness often exceeded what was recorded in official history. These narratives challenge us to consider history as a living process, where legend, memory, and material evidence intersect to create a more holistic understanding of human achievement. The Lost Voyages were not merely accidents or myths. They were part of a conscious, deliberate, and sophisticated system of exploration preserved across generations. Ultimately, the study of prophecies and legends transforms our perception of ancient navigation and discovery. What was once dismissed as superstition becomes a lens through which to interpret forgotten evidence. Encoded knowledge, recurring motifs, and symbolic descriptions provide crucial insight into the scope, timing, and impact of fleets that reached lands long before mainstream history recorded them. These narratives remind us that human curiosity, skill, and ambition are timeless, and that the past contains layers of understanding waiting to be uncovered by those willing to look beyond the obvious. By connecting prophecies, legends, and material evidence, we uncover a hidden layer of human history. The Lost Voyages were not merely ephemeral or isolated. They were deliberate, sophisticated, and transformative, leaving traces in maps, artifacts, and collective memory. These stories challenge the official narrative, urging us to recognize that the human capacity for exploration, innovation, and knowledge is far greater than conventional history suggests. Legends, when interpreted carefully, provide not only clues but a guide, a roadmap for understanding voyages that shaped the world long before recorded history acknowledged their existence. Maps have always been more than mere tools. They are mirrors of human ambition, imagination, and knowledge. They capture not just physical landscapes, but the aspirations and achievements of those who dare to explore the unknown. Throughout history, certain maps have emerged that challenge conventional timelines, depicting lands, coastlines, and routes long before they were officially discovered. These forgotten maps and hidden routes hint at voyages undertaken by fleets that reached distant shores centuries ahead of documented history, leaving trails visible only to those willing to read between the lines. The Piri Reis map, created in 1513, is among the most remarkable examples. Compiled from earlier sources, the map depicts the South American coastline with astonishing precision, while also hinting at features that some scholars interpret as the Antarctic coast, ice-free centuries before formal discovery. What makes the map extraordinary is its synthesis of multiple sources: Mediterranean charts, reports from sailors, and possibly pre-Columbian knowledge. Its existence implies that fleets had traversed vast distances and meticulously recorded their observations, preserving them in a form that survived the erasure and loss that claimed so much early maritime knowledge. Other early maps present similarly perplexing anomalies. Medieval European portolan charts, known for their accuracy in mapping coasts, include islands, reefs, and hazards that were far ahead of their time. Some depict phantom islands that disappear in later records, suggesting temporary landforms, misidentified currents, or perhaps lands glimpsed by fleets that were never formally recognized. These maps reveal routes that could have guided seafarers across oceans, documenting voyages that were never officially recorded but left a faint, enduring trace in cartography. Hidden routes are often encoded in the maps themselves. Unusual symbols, dotted lines, and patterns of annotation may indicate navigational pathways, currents, or strategic landing sites. To the untrained eye, these markings appear decorative or arbitrary. Yet for those initiated in navigation, they may have been precise guides to traverse vast, uncharted waters. Ancient fleets could have relied on such encoded maps to plan return voyages, avoid hazards, and maintain trade networks. A system of knowledge carefully preserved and selectively revealed. The idea of lost knowledge becomes clearer when we examine maps that contradict later official records. Some charts depict coastlines or islands that vanish from later surveys, while omitting lands later deemed significant. This selective accuracy suggests that information was recorded by observers with first-hand experience, yet later censored or lost due to political, economic, or religious reasons. Maps may have been deliberately withheld, altered, or hidden, protecting strategic advantages and obscuring the achievements of early explorers for broader public knowledge. Textual route guides complement these visual records. Mariners' logs, coastal surveys, and travel narratives often describe voyages along waters unknown to most historians, including details of islands, reefs, and currents that align with mysterious map features. These texts, though often fragmentary or cryptic, corroborate cartographic evidence, reinforcing the notion that fleets undertook intentional voyages to distant lands. Together, maps and textual routes form a dual system of evidence, one visual and one narrative, suggesting sophisticated, pre-recorded exploration. Cross-cultural comparisons offer further intrigue. Polynesian stick charts, used to navigate vast stretches of the Pacific, share conceptual similarities with Mediterranean maps, despite the vast geographic distance. Both encode currents, island locations, and swell patterns in ways understandable only to those trained in the craft. The resemblance hints at either parallel development or the remarkable possibility that knowledge traveled across oceans via fleets, creating an interwoven network of maritime expertise long before recorded history recognized it. The survival of these forgotten maps in obscure archives and private collections underscores the fragility of historical memory. Many were deliberately hidden or copied incompletely to protect trade secrets, political dominance, or religious authority. Fires, floods, and societal upheavals further threatened preservation. In some cases, maps survived only in fragments, requiring modern researchers to reconstruct lost knowledge from partial records. This fragility helps explain why pre-Columbian landfalls, advanced navigational feats, and early exploration often appear absent in mainstream history. The evidence existed, yet access to it was limited. The hidden routes indicated on these maps suggest strategic foresight. Ocean currents, prevailing winds, and celestial alignments were meticulously recorded, allowing fleets to traverse vast distances with a degree of predictability. These were not accidental journeys, but calculated, deliberate voyages. Navigators relied on centuries of accumulated wisdom, careful observation, and precise recording to chart courses that would take them across oceans, reach distant lands, and, in some cases, return home safely. Such planning reveals a level of sophistication and intent that challenges conventional assumptions about pre-modern exploration. Even more remarkable is the layering of knowledge across time. Some maps appear to incorporate data from multiple generations of explorers, combining observations made decades or centuries apart. This cumulative approach suggests a tradition of recording and transmitting maritime knowledge, preserving the insights of lost fleets even as individual voyages faded from memory. The act of documenting routes, hazards, and coastlines was not casual. It was a deliberate attempt to encode wisdom for future navigators, ensuring continuity in exploration despite societal upheavals and deliberate suppression. Finally, The forgotten maps and hidden routes challenge us to reconsider the very notion of discovery. They reveal that the oceans were navigated, lands were reached, and knowledge was transmitted long before official recognition. These cartographic relics, with their anomalies, encoded instructions, and cryptic markings, are evidence of fleets that achieved remarkable feats. Each line, symbol, and annotation is a breadcrumb for modern researchers, guiding us toward a more accurate understanding of human exploration, a story of ambition, skill, and daring that stretches far beyond conventional history. By tracing these maps and routes, we uncover a world in which human curiosity, ingenuity, and ambition knew no bounds. Ancient fleets may have crossed oceans systematically, interacted with distant societies, and left traces encoded in maps, charts, and oral memory. Forgotten maps and hidden routes are thus not mere curiosities. They're the keys to reconstructing voyages that redefine the limits of human capability, offering modern explorers and historians a glimpse of a lost chapter in our collective past. Some discoveries possess a force that transcends mere archaeology. They challenge the timelines of civilization itself, rewrite accepted history, and suggest that humans achieved feats previously thought impossible. These climactic discoveries, tangible artifacts, extraordinary relics, and anomalous objects, are the cornerstone of the Lost Voyage's narrative. They provide compelling evidence that fleets reached distant lands long before recorded history acknowledged them, leaving a legacy that is only now emerging from the shadows. Shipwrecks, hidden beneath layers of sediment or preserved in unexpected conditions, offer one of the most direct forms of evidence. Vessels discovered off remote coasts or submerged along ancient trade routes often defy local construction techniques, featuring hull designs, joinery, and fastening methods unknown in their purported era. Timber selection demonstrates knowledge of material durability and resistance to seawater, while hull shapes indicate a capacity for open ocean navigation rather than mere coastal travel. Each wreck is a frozen testament to the skill and ambition of the voyagers, narrating stories of daring expeditions that survived centuries of obscurity. Beyond vessels, artifacts recovered from coastal and island settlements provide further evidence of pre-recorded exploration. Metal tools, navigational instruments, and ceremonial objects found thousands of miles from their origin suggest extensive travel and contact between civilizations. Bronze implements in the Americas, ornate jewelry in Polynesia, and finely crafted pottery in Africa reveal a network of exchange and influence that predates established trade routes. The sophistication of these items hints at the existence of explorers who carried knowledge and materials across oceans, leaving behind traces that challenge conventional timelines and assumptions about early human mobility. Technological anomalies embedded in these artifacts amplify the mystery. Some objects demonstrate metallurgical precision, advanced joinery, or instruments capable of measuring celestial positions with accuracy far exceeding expectations for the period. Navigation devices, compasses, and astrolabes recovered in regions thought technologically primitive suggest that these voyagers possessed knowledge and skill that allowed them to traverse vast distances reliably. Such discoveries not only validate the feasibility of these ancient voyages, but also force a re-evaluation of the capabilities of civilizations long considered isolated or technologically inferior. Equally compelling are relics that appear intentionally encoded or symbolic. Some artifacts carry inscriptions, carvings, or markings that seem to record routes, star charts, or interactions with local populations. These inscriptions hint at dual purposes, preserving knowledge for those trained to interpret it, while obscuring critical information from outsiders. The presence of encoded relics suggests that voyages were not merely exploratory. They were carefully planned, documented, and in some cases intentionally hidden from public knowledge. These layers of complexity underscore the intelligence, foresight, and sophistication of the fleets. Mysterious human artifacts also appear in locations that conventional history cannot explain. In the Americas, Objects of European or Mediterranean origin have been found in pre-Columbian contexts, suggesting contact long before the voyages of Columbus or other documented explorers. In the Pacific, tools and ceremonial items align with techniques from distant lands, hinting at deliberate cultural exchange rather than random drift. Each anomaly builds a compelling case for intentional navigation and planned interactions, revealing fleets that reached lands long before they were officially recognized. Even ruins and architectural remnants contribute to this narrative. Coastal settlements sometimes exhibit construction techniques, alignment with celestial bodies, or material use that reflects knowledge likely acquired for visitors with advanced maritime understanding. Certain coastal temples or markers appear aligned with navigational stars, suggesting that ancient architects may have incorporated lessons learned from voyagers who crossed vast oceans. These structures, often overlooked or misinterpreted, provide additional evidence that human ingenuity extended beyond local boundaries, informed by contact with skilled explorers. Textual evidence complements these material discoveries. Rare manuscripts, logs, and chronicles describe fleets reaching unknown lands, trading with indigenous populations, or documenting resources and hazards along the way. While fragmentary, these texts correlate with artifacts and shipwrecks, forming a multidimensional body of evidence. For example, descriptions of vessels encountering unusual currents or mapping distant islands align with the locations of submerged shipwrecks, creating a coherent narrative that bridges legend with tangible proof. Some discoveries carry profound implications for our understanding of global history. Genetic studies indicate early contact between populations previously thought isolated, suggesting that pre-recorded voyages facilitated not only trade but human migration. Cultural echoes, artifacts, and inscriptions corroborate these findings, hinting at networks of knowledge transfer that span continents. The convergence of physical evidence, oral tradition, and genetic data reinforces the argument that these voyages were deliberate, systematic, and historically significant. The cumulative impact of these climactic discoveries is transformative. They reveal explorers who navigated vast oceans, mastered celestial and environmental navigation, and engaged meaningfully with the peoples they encountered. Unlike myth or legend, these artifacts provide tangible proof that fleets undertook systematic voyages, leaving behind relics that continue to challenge mainstream historical narratives. Each discovery strengthens the case for a lost chapter of human exploration, where ambition, skill, and courage transcended the limits imposed by geography, technology, or time. Furthermore,
the geographical spread of these discoveries suggests a coordinated network of exploration. The recurrence of similar artifact types, construction methods, and navigational knowledge across continents implies shared understanding or direct interaction. Fleets may have been intentionally charting routes, establishing temporary settlements, or engaging in cultural and technological exchange. Such sophistication indicates that these voyages were neither random nor isolated, but part of a deliberate effort to explore, document, and influence distant lands. Finally, the climactic discoveries are not merely historical curiosities. They carry modern implications. They inspire contemporary explorers to retrace ancient routes, validate the feasibility of these long-forgotten voyages, and challenge the limitations of what is possible. They remind us that human innovation and curiosity have always been boundless, that ambition can drive societies to achieve feats previously deemed impossible, and that our understanding of history is still incomplete. These artifacts, ships, tools, inscriptions, and ruins are living reminders of a past that continues to shape the present, urging us to reconsider the narrative of human discovery and embrace the extraordinary scope of our collective journey. In the end, these artifacts rewrite history not only by proving that lost fleets existed, but by illuminating the audacity, intelligence, and ambition of the human spirit. They show us that civilizations capable of advanced navigation, precise craftsmanship, and strategic foresight thrive long before recorded recognition. The tangible evidence left behind, in shipwrecks, tools, ruins, and manuscripts, confirms that humanity's drive to explore, connect, and innovate is far older and more sophisticated than conventional narratives suggest. The Lost Voyages, once obscured, are finally revealed in their full grandeur, challenging us to expand our understanding of history and the true potential of human achievement.
History, in its official form, is rarely a neutral record of events. It is a narrative shaped by those in power, rulers, empires, religious institutions, and economic elites, each with an interest in controlling what was remembered and what was forgotten. The story of the Lost Voyages is emblematic of this selective preservation. Entire fleets, their discoveries, and the knowledge they carried may have been deliberately erased, obscured, or marginalized, leaving only whispers and folklore, fragments of maps, and enigmatic artifacts. To understand why history forgot, we must examine the forces behind suppression, the mechanisms that concealed knowledge, and the subtle ways these voyages were hidden from the mainstream record. Powerful empires recognized the strategic value of information about distant lands, trade routes, and maritime passages. Knowledge of safe harbors, abundant resources, or fertile regions could alter the balance of power in dramatic ways. Fleets that ventured beyond official records were threats to established authority, as their discoveries could empower rival states, independent merchants, or insurgent factions. By controlling access to information, rulers maintained dominance over resources and territories. Suppression ensured that knowledge of advanced maritime routes, previously discovered lands, and technological innovations remained exclusive, creating an artificial timeline that conveniently omitted extraordinary voyages. Religious institutions also played a decisive role. In many societies, exploration and discovery were intertwined with spiritual authority. Reporting unfamiliar peoples, technologies, or customs risked challenging prevailing doctrines or cosmological narratives. Voyagers who documented lands outside accepted boundaries could be censored or reinterpreted to align with dogma. Manuscripts might be rewritten, accounts suppressed, or findings encoded in symbolic language comprehensible only to initiated scholars. The result was a historical record shaped less by objective observation and more by the need to maintain spiritual and societal conformity, pushing evidence of extraordinary exploration to the margins. Economic motives compounded this suppression. Knowledge of trade routes, natural resources, and navigable seas represented immense wealth and opportunity. Elites who monopolized such information could dominate markets, control regional economies, and secure long-term strategic advantage. Revealing pre-recorded voyages or lost routes threatened these monopolies. By deliberately omitting or obscuring evidence, authorities ensured that competitive advantage remained concentrated, preserving power and profit while erasing alternative histories of exploration from official accounts. Even accidental loss contributed to the erasure of knowledge. Fires, floods, natural decay, and the fragility of manuscripts destroyed countless records of fleets, trade, and maritime exploration. Libraries, archives, and private collections, which might have preserved maps, ship logs, and accounts of distant lands, were vulnerable to disaster. Yet deliberate acts of destruction were equally common. Documents, inscriptions, and artifacts were sometimes eradicated to prevent strategic or political knowledge from falling into rival hands. In such cases, even when evidence existed, it became inaccessible to historians, creating a sense of historical voids that obscured extraordinary voyages. The deliberate encoding of knowledge is another subtle method of suppression. Some artifacts, maps, and manuscripts were designed to be understood only by those trained to read them. Celestial navigation charts, cryptic inscriptions, and encoded documents ensure that information survived selectively. To outsiders, the fleets seemed to vanish, leaving behind mystery and legend rather than clear historical record. These encoded relics suggest that knowledge was treated as both practical and esoteric, safeguarded by those entrusted with the art of navigation, maritime technology, and cross-cultural interaction. The consequences of such selective memory are profound. Generations have been denied a full understanding of human exploration, technological achievement, and global connectivity. Conventional historical narratives fail to account for sophisticated fleets that reached distant lands centuries before official discovery, reinforcing a simplified and linear view of history. This distortion limits appreciation of human ingenuity, creating the illusion that civilization's capabilities evolved gradually rather than through bold leaps enabled by daring voyagers. Evidence of suppression is often subtle but pervasive. Anomalous maps, cryptic inscriptions, obscure manuscripts, and unexplained artifacts contradict mainstream accounts. Oral traditions preserve memory of strange visitors, vanished fleets, and remarkable technologies, providing indirect confirmation that exploration occurred but was intentionally marginalized. The interplay of surviving evidence and conspicuous absence challenges historians to question why certain stories were preserved while others were concealed. Suppression also had cultural dimensions. Societies may have altered oral traditions, mythologizing voyagers to fit local narratives or spiritual frameworks, thereby preserving fragments of truth while erasing concrete evidence. Legends of strangers from the sea, mysterious gifts, and vanished fleets are often dismissed as folklore, yet their consistency across regions and cultures suggests they encode genuine historical encounters. By mythologizing these events, societies safeguarded knowledge while obscuring it from those unable to interpret its symbolic language. Political upheaval intensified the erasure. Conquests, regime changes, and shifting alliances frequently resulted in the deliberate destruction of records and artifacts associated with prior powers or rival fleets. Temples, libraries, and ports containing crucial evidence were destroyed, altered, or repurposed, further fragmenting historical memory. Even when some documents survived, they were often reinterpreted, censored, or selectively published, leaving gaps that modern researchers struggle to fill. One particularly compelling aspect of suppressed knowledge is the intertwining of secrecy and survival. Fleets that traversed dangerous waters, carrying advanced technology or knowledge of fertile lands, may have deliberately concealed their discoveries to protect themselves from competitors, pirates, or political authorities. This self-imposed secrecy amplified historical erasure, as even first-hand accounts were intentionally coded, leaving behind tantalizing fragments rather than comprehensive records. The result is a pattern of disappearance and partial preservation that has perplexed historians for centuries. Moreover, suppression was not always centralized or deliberate. It often resulted from a combination of societal priorities, natural disasters, and the ephemeral nature of memory. Knowledge that was not actively recorded in durable materials or intentionally safeguarded could easily vanish. Oral traditions, while resilient, were vulnerable to reinterpretation, assimilation, or loss, leaving only traces for modern investigators to piece together. The fragile survival of maps, artifacts, and cryptic texts underscores how easily even monumental voyages could slip into obscurity. The broader impact of suppressed knowledge extends into modern understanding. Recognizing the forces that shaped historical memory allows us to reconstruct voyages, technology, and cultural exchanges that were previously invisible. By examining what was hidden, encoded, or lost, scholars can piece together a more accurate picture of human ambition, ingenuity, and global connectivity. Suppressed knowledge reveals that the lost fleets were not mere anomalies, but deliberate, skillful endeavors whose traces survive in artifacts, maps, oral traditions, and anomalies waiting for interpretation. Ultimately, understanding suppression transforms the narrative of the lost voyages from legend into a story of deliberate concealment, courage, and human ambition. It explains why some fleets vanished from official records, why extraordinary discoveries remained unacknowledged, and why the true scope of pre-recorded exploration remained hidden for centuries. By confronting suppression, we gain a clearer vision of history as a dynamic process, a story shaped not only by what happened, but by what authorities and circumstances allowed us to remember. Suppressed knowledge also invites a philosophical reflection. It demonstrates that history is never fixed, that human achievement is broader than recorded timelines suggest, and that curiosity and ingenuity often transcend the boundaries of official recognition. The Lost Voyages, erased yet preserved in fragments, challenge us to question what we accept as fact, to explore beyond conventional archives, and to appreciate the remarkable depth and complexity of human history. They remind us that the story of exploration is as much about what was hidden as what was recorded, revealing a rich tapestry of ambition, discovery, and resilience. In conclusion, the deliberate and accidental suppression of knowledge shaped the way we understand exploration, technology, and cross-cultural interaction. Fleets that reached distant lands long before documented discovery were obscured by politics, religion, economics, and the fragility of memory. Yet, in fragments, maps, artifacts, oral traditions, and encoded texts, their story survives. By unraveling this suppressed history, we can reconstruct a narrative of human curiosity, courage, and ingenuity that challenges conventional understanding and illuminates a lost chapter of global exploration, offering profound insight into the capabilities, ambition, and daring of our ancestors. The story of the Lost Voyages is not confined to the distant past. It resonates profoundly in the present, leaving traces that continue to shape our understanding of exploration, human ambition, and global interconnectedness. These fleets, their routes, and the knowledge they carried are more than historical footnotes. They represent a legacy of human curiosity, ingenuity, and courage that echoes across centuries. By examining these echoes, we begin to understand how these hidden voyages influence modern navigation, archaeology, culture, and even the philosophical understanding of human potential. Modern research often uncovers fragments of these ancient journeys in unexpected ways. Satellite imagery, deep-sea surveys, and archaeological excavations reveal anomalies, submerged settlements, forgotten shipwrecks, and artifacts that align precisely with the routes suggested by ancient maps. Such discoveries provide concrete confirmation that fleets reached lands long before official records acknowledged them. Each finding challenges the notion that early civilizations were isolated, highlighting the audacity, skill, and foresight required to navigate vast, uncharted waters. The continued uncovering of these traces bridges the gap between legend and tangible history, reminding us that our ancestors' ambitions were boundless. Cultural legacies are equally significant. Oral traditions, songs, rituals, and festivals preserve subtle memory of encounters with distant voyagers. Stories of strangers from the sea, gifts from unknown travelers, and sudden appearances of foreign technology or practices are recurrent across continents, suggesting that these fleets left enduring marks on the societies they touched. Even when framed as myth, these narratives encode memory of real events, preserving knowledge in symbolic form for generations. Cultural echoes demonstrate that the Lost Voyages were not merely ephemeral. They shaped local customs, belief systems, and social interactions, leaving a lasting impression that survives even today. The technological heritage of these fleets is particularly striking. Shipbuilding techniques, navigational tools, and other technological artifacts hint at expertise far ahead of the purported period. Studying these relics provides insight into methods of celestial navigation, hull construction, and maritime strategy that were once thought impossible for ancient civilizations. The transmission of such knowledge may have influenced subsequent generations, contributing to the development of global navigation, trade, and exploration. By reconstructing these technologies, we gain a deeper appreciation for the sophistication, ambition, and scientific understanding of these voyagers. Historical interpretation itself is reshaped by acknowledging these lost voyages. If fleets reached distant lands before recorded history, conventional timelines of discovery, colonization, and trade must be reevaluated. The idea of discovery becomes more complex, acknowledging that exploration was an ongoing, global endeavor rather than a linear series of isolated events. Incorporating evidence from artifacts, maps, and oral tradition allows historians to construct a more nuanced understanding of human mobility, maritime skill, and cross-cultural interaction, revealing a continuum of exploration that extends far beyond conventional records. There is also a profound philosophical dimension. These lost voyages challenge assumptions about the limits of human capability, the accuracy of historical narratives, and the finality of recorded knowledge. They remind us that history is often incomplete and that extraordinary feats of navigation, endurance, and ingenuity can vanish from official accounts for centuries. The lost fleets, erased yet preserved in fragments, compel us to reconsider what humanity is capable of achieving when curiosity, ambition, and skill intersect. They highlight the resilience of human innovation, showing that exploration is as much about daring imagination as it is about survival. Modern explorers and enthusiasts are retracing these ancient routes, blending historical research with practical navigation. Voyagers inspired by lost maps, cryptic manuscripts, and oral traditions attempt to replicate the journeys, testing the feasibility of pre-recorded routes and uncovering hidden knowledge in the process. These expeditions do more than validate historical hypotheses. They forge a tangible connection between past and present, allowing contemporary humanity to experience the same risks, challenges, and exhilaration that ancient navigators faced. This hands-on exploration turns history into lived experience, bridging centuries of human ambition. The Lost Voyages also resonate through popular culture. Documentaries, novels, and digital media increasingly explore the theme of forgotten exploration, weaving together legend, artifact, and scholarship into compelling narratives. Audiences are captivated by the notion that humans reached distant lands, mastered advanced technologies, and left traces hidden from mainstream history. This fascination reflects a collective recognition of humanity's enduring curiosity, ingenuity, and drive to explore.
Qualities that remain central to our identity. The stories of these lost fleets inspire imagination, investigation, and appreciation for the courage of our ancestors. Environmental and scientific implications are equally notable. Ancient knowledge of winds, currents, and seasonal patterns preserved in maps and oral traditions informs modern maritime science. Recognizing these patterns contributes to understanding historical climate, oceanography, and sustainable navigation. Furthermore, evidence of early contact between distant populations has implications for anthropology and genetics, indicating that human migration, trade, and cultural exchange were more interconnected than previously assumed. The Lost Voyages reveal a web of global interactions that predate formal colonization and challenge simplified narratives of human isolation. Economically, these discoveries highlight the sophistication of early trade and resource acquisition. Fleets that reached distant lands likely gathered information about valuable materials, fertile soils, and strategic ports. This knowledge, suppressed or forgotten, had the potential to reshape economies, influence political power, and guide human settlement patterns. Modern study of these voyages provides insight into how knowledge of the natural world, coupled with ambition and navigational skill, allowed early societies to expand influence and wealth long before conventional history credits them with such accomplishments. The human dimension of legacy is equally profound. These voyages demonstrate resilience, bravery, and collaboration on an unprecedented scale. Ancient sailors faced hostile seas, unpredictable weather, and unknown lands, yet navigated with precision, leaving behind artifacts, maps, and stories that endure. Their legacy is a testament to human curiosity, the will to explore, and the capacity to adapt and innovate in the face of uncertainty. These qualities resonate in modern endeavors, in exploration, science, and the pursuit of knowledge, reminding us that the spirit of the lost fleets lives on in our own achievements. Ultimately, the echoes of the Lost Voyages transform our understanding of history and human potential. They reveal a world where ambition, curiosity, and skill drove exploration long before formal recognition, where technology and knowledge exceeded what conventional timelines suggest, and where contact and exchange connected civilizations in ways previously unrecognized. The fleet's daring journeys, suppressed knowledge, and enduring legacy remind us that history is never complete, and that humanity's capacity for exploration, innovation, and discovery is timeless. By tracing these legacies, we gain not only historical insight, but also a philosophical perspective. Human potential is not confined by the limitations of recorded history. The Lost Voyages challenge us to question what we accept as fact, to explore beyond conventional knowledge, and to acknowledge the extraordinary achievements of our ancestors. In this light, history becomes not a static record, but a living tapestry, a story of curiosity, courage, and resilience stretching across oceans and centuries. In conclusion, the Lost Voyages leave a legacy that is as profound as it is mysterious. They reshape our understanding of exploration, technology, culture, and human capability. Their artifacts, maps, oral traditions, and anomalies continue to inspire research, adventure, and imagination. These voyages demonstrate that human ambition and ingenuity are timeless, that history is more layered and complex than it appears, and that the echoes of the past continue to shape the present. The fleets that once vanished from memory are now guiding us toward a richer, more expansive understanding of what it means to explore, to innovate, and to connect across time and space.